Prince Rogers Nelson was the most controlling artist in the history of the music industry. He fought Warner Brother Records so ferociously that he changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol and wrote the word slave across his face in protest. He owned Paisley Park, his studio, his home, his kingdom outright. He owned his master recordings, something almost no artist of his generation accomplished. He owned property in the Turks and Caicos Islands on Providenciales, one of the most exclusive and private luxury real estate markets in the world. He controlled every note he ever recorded, every image ever taken of him, every release that bore his name. And on April 21st, 2016, he died of an accidental fentanyl overdose without a will, without a trust, without a single legal document directing what should happen to any of it. 6 half-siblings who barely knew each other were thrown together by Minnesota intestacy law. What followed was 6 years of the most expensive probate proceeding in music history, and it is still not fully over.
Well, you were at those music awards.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Chris and I represented an artist named Crystal Lip. Crystal is a multidisciplinary musician, producer, and visual artist, American-born, based in France. He is someone whose creative intelligence operates at a level that most people in the entertainment industry never fully understood until they were in a room with him. At 25 years old, he created a permanent light and sound installation inside the Grevin Wax Museum in Paris, the Palais des Mirages, a room that was built in the 1900s for the Universal Exhibition and that was known in the circles that knew these things as Michael Jackson's favorite room in Paris. He worked with Grammy-winning engineers. He represented everything that Chris believed in the entertainment industry should be building toward. In 2016, I took Crystal to the American Music Awards, the year Prince died. They honored Prince that night with a tribute that stopped the room. And I mean, literally, the room stopped, the noise stopped, the industry chatter and the industry politics and the industry pretense. All of it stopped because what was playing on that stage was something that could not be manufactured or replicated or scheduled for the next quarter. It was the acknowledgement that something genuinely irreplaceable had left the world. I sat there and I thought about Prince's property in Turks and Caicos on Providenciales. I thought about it because I know those islands. I know those islands really well. Providenciales, North Caicos, Middle Caicos, Como, Parrot Cay, where Bruce Willis had property, where Donna Karan had property, and where Keith Richards has property. Parrot Cay is a 15-minute boat ride from Providenciales. The people who choose that archipelago, who planted something permanent in those waters, were not vacationers. They were people who understood privacy, beauty, and the value of owning something extraordinary away from the noise of the world. Prince chose Providenciales, the most controlling artist in the history of the music industry, the man who changed his name rather than give his music away, chose a private island in the Caribbean to own something that was entirely his. And he still died without a will, without a plan, without a single document that said, this is what I want to happen to the kingdom I have built. I am Natalie Francine.
I'm Alexis Nassif. This is Wealth, War, and Real Estate.
Celebrity.
Estate Interrupted, episode 10. Died with a kingdom.
Without a kingdom.
Right.
For women, by women.
And men too, don't forget that.
I got to see this guy, this gentleman, I think his name was Angel or something. He's a lefty guitarist who did a whole performance about Prince in New Orleans. It was amazing. True crime moment. Prince Rogers Nelson was born on June 7th, 1958 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. His father, John L. Nelson, was a jazz musician who performed under the name Prince Rogers. His mother, Maddie Shaw, was a jazz singer. Music was not a career choice for Prince. It was the air he breathed from birth. He began playing piano at age 7. By his early teens, he was proficient on guitar, bass, and drums. He wrote his first song at 14. He signed his first record deal with Warner Brothers Record at 18 years old, negotiating the extraordinary condition that he would produce his own albums, an almost unheard of concession for a teenager singing with a major label in 1978. He was not just talented, he was strategically intelligent about his talent from the very beginning.
Prince's commercial breakthrough came with 1999 and 1982 and Purple Rain in 1984. Purple Rain, the album, the film, and the soundtrack was a cultural event of a scale that is almost impossible to fully describe from the outside. The album spent 24 consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard 200. It won 2 Academy Awards. It remains one of the best-selling albums in history. Prince was 26 years old. What followed over the next 3 decades was the most sustained and very creative output of any artist of his generation. Sign of the Times, Love Sexy, Diamonds and Pearls, The Gold Experience, Musicology, 3121, Planet Earth. He released 39 studio albums in his lifetime. He wrote songs for other artists that became some of their biggest hits. Manic Monday for the Bangles, Nothing Compares to You for Sinead O'Connor, I Feel for You for Chaka Khan. He was one of the most gifted composers, multi-instrumentalists, and live performances in history of popular music.
Creative man.
He was very creative, too much.
True crime moment. In the early 1990s, Prince's relationship with Warner Brothers Records deteriorated into one of the most public and acrimonious disputes between an artist and a label in the history of the music industry. The core issue was ownership. Warner Brothers owned Prince's master recordings, the actual audio files that represented the most valuable assets in his catalog. Prince wanted them back. Warner Brothers had no intention of giving them. The dispute became a crusade. Prince changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol, referred to by the press as the artist formerly known as Prince, specifically because his contract bound the name Prince to Warner Brothers. He wrote the word slave across his cheek in bold black letters to appear at public events and interviews. He released music in unconventional ways, specifically to fulfill his contractual obligations as quickly as possible so he could walk away. In 1996, after releasing the contractually required albums, he left Warner Brothers and reclaimed the right to use his name. He won. He got his name back. He retained the masters he had recorded after the dispute. He built his own label, NPG Records. He built Paisley Park, a 65,000 square foot recording and creative compound in Chanhassen, Minnesota. that was simultaneously his studio, his performance venue, his home, and the vault containing an archive of recordings that experts estimated at hundreds of unreleased songs and albums.
Amazing.
He controlled his creative output completely. He was one of the first major artists to understand that the internet could be used to distribute music directly to fans, bypassing the label system entirely. He was also one of the first major artists to successfully use the internet's copyright infrastructure to protect his work. He aggressively pursued anyone who posted unauthorized recordings or images. He understood intellectual property law in ways that most artists never do. The man who understood intellectual property law better than almost any artist alive died without a will. I want to spend a moment on the Turks and Caicos specifically because it is not incidental to who Prince was. It is central to it. Providenciales, Provo, is the main island of the Turks and Caicos archipelago. It is one of the most genuinely private luxury real estate markets in the world. Not private in the way that Beverly Hills is private, where the gates are high, but everyone knows who lives there.
Yeah.
Private in a way that matters to people who are truly famous, truly wealthy, and truly exhausted by the machinery of their own celebrity. The people who own property in that archipelago have made a specific choice. They have chosen beauty over profile, privacy over visibility, permanence over performance. Bruce Willis had property on Parrot Cay, 15 minutes by boat from Provo. Donna Karan, the legendary fashion designer who built a wellness retreat there. Keith Richards. These were not people who needed to be seen on an island. These were people who needed to disappear on one.
Prince owned property on Providenciales, a man who had spent his entire career fighting for ownership and control, who had changed his name and written slave across his face rather than surrender. What was his choice? Providenciales as the place where he planted something permanent, away from Minneapolis, away from Paisley Park, away from the industry. That property, like everything else, had no plan around it when he died. No trust, no designated beneficiary, no instruction. It became part of a Minnesota probate proceeding administered by people who had never been to those islands and did not understand what it meant that Prince had chosen them. It was a gorgeous place.
Oh, it's
amazing. It is beautiful.
Prince built a kingdom, a recording compound in Minnesota, a catalog of music that has never been fully cataloged, a real estate portfolio spanning the American Midwest and the Caribbean. He built it with extraordinary deliberateness, fighting for every inch of ownership at every stage of his career. And then he left no instructions for what should happen to any of it. The probate court that administered his estate did not know Prince, did not understand Paisley Park, did not understand what the Providenciales property represented. They did not care about the difference between a piece of real estate and a deliberate choice about how to live. The court followed the law, and the law gave everything to people who had not been a part of building it at all.
Now the question is, what color was it? Or is it?
Oh yeah, pink or purple, isn't it? Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's a very wonderful property. It's right on the ocean.
We'll put an image of it when we're doing this. True crime moment. April 21st, 2016, Paisley Park, Chanhassen, Minnesota, Prince Rogers Nelson is found unresponsive in an elevator at Paisley Park. He is 57 years old. Emergency responders attempt resuscitation. He's pronounced dead at the scene. The cause of death is determined to be an accidental fentanyl overdose.
Wow.
He had been suffering from chronic hip pain for years, a consequence of decades of high energy live performances that included extraordinary physical demands. He had been taking prescription painkillers. The fentanyl that killed him was counterfeit. Pills that looked like prescription hydrocodone but contained fentanyl at lethal doses. He did not know what he was taking.
Oh my God.
His death was accidental and it was immediate. He had no time to make arrangements that he never had made.
That should have been done long before.
Within days of Prince's death, the legal machinery began. His sister, Tyka Nelson, filed a petition in Carver County, Minnesota, acknowledging Prince had died without a will. Under Minnesota intestacy law, with no spouse, no children, and no surviving parents, his estate passed to his siblings. Tyka Nelson and his full sister. 5 siblings were also identified: Sharon Nelson, Noreen Nelson, John Nelson, Alfred Jackson, and Omar Baker. Some of them had close relationships with Prince. Others had almost none. All of them, by operation of Minnesota intestacy law, were suddenly equal heirs to one of the most complex and valuable estates in music history. True crime moment. The estate was initially estimated to be worth approximately $200 million. The IRS disagreed with the estate's own valuation and ultimately valued it at $156.4 million, a figure that itself was disputed. The difference between the estate's valuation and the IRS valuation generated a tax dispute that took years to resolve. The federal estate tax on $156 million at the applicable rate consumed tens of millions of dollars. While the tax dispute was being litigated, the estate could not be distributed. The heirs could not move forward. Paisley Park sat in legal limbo. The vault, containing hundreds of unreleased recordings, sat untouched. Everything Prince had built was frozen in a Minnesota probate proceeding, while accountants and attorneys argued over its value.
3 of the 6 heirs eventually sold their interest to Primary Wave Music, a music publishing and management company that specializes in acquiring and monetizing legacy catalogs. Primary Wave paid significant sums for those interests and ended up controlling approximately 50% of Prince's estate. The remaining heirs held their interest through a structure called Prince Legacy LLC. The probate proceeding was formally settled in 2022, 6 years after Prince died. 6 years, tens of millions in legal fees, administrative costs, and tax obligations. An estate that should have transferred cleanly and privately, administered publicly in a Minnesota courtroom for 6 years because there was no will, no plan.
And then in 2024, the heirs went back to court, fighting each other over control of Prince Legacy LLC, disputes over management authority, allegations of bad faith. The war that began the day Prince died has never fully ended. As of 2026, 10 years after his death, the estate of Prince Rogers Nelson is still generating litigation.
And true crime moment.
The Paisley Park compound, the 65,000 square foot kingdom that Prince built and owned outright, was converted into a museum. It opened to the public in October 2016, 6 months after his death. Hundreds of thousands of visitors have toured it since. The vault containing Prince's unreleased recordings has been partially opened. Some recordings have been released. The question of what should be released, how, and on whose authority has been a source of ongoing dispute amongst the heirs and their respective advisors. Prince had strong views about his unreleased music. He never wrote them down.
And the war. Prince's estate is the most complete illustration in this series of what intestacy law does to a complex estate. Every other case involved someone who had a plan that was incomplete. Prince had no plan at all, and the result was that every decision about the legacy, the music, the property, the brand, the archive, the vault, the provincialis real estate was made by probate and processes he would never have chosen. The man who changed his name rather than let a corporation control it. His 6 art spent 6 years as an asset at a Minnesota probate proceeding.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with the complex estates, even regular estates with not a lot of assets.
People are fighting over it.
Absolutely, all the time. Intestacy is the legal condition of dying without a valid will. Every state and every country has intestate laws. These are statutes that determine how your estate is distributed if you die without a plan. They are designed to be logical and fair. They distribute your estate to your closest relatives in a predetermined order. Spouses, then children, then parents, then siblings. What intestacy laws cannot do, what no law can do, is honor your specific wishes, your specific relationships, your specific understanding of who should receive what and why and under what conditions. The intestacy law that governed Prince's estate did not know that he had Tyka Nelson and a close relationship. It did not know which half-siblings had been part of his life and which had not. It distributed everything equally because equal is the only thing that the law knows how to do when you have not told it what you actually want.
Too bad.
Yep.
And when there's multiple jurisdictions, there becomes even a bigger problem. Prince's estate had a specific complexity that the Minnesota probate court was not well equipped to handle. Property in multiple jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Paisley Park is in Minnesota. The Provincialis property is in the Turks and Caicos Islands, a British overseas territory with its own legal system and its own property laws and its own probate procedures. When you own real property in a foreign jurisdiction, whether that is the Turks and Caicos, France, Mexico, the United Kingdom, anywhere outside the United States, your American will and your American trust do not automatically govern what happens to that property. You may need a separate legal instrument in that jurisdiction. You may need local legal counsel who understands the specific property laws of that territory. You may need your estate plan coordinated across multiple legal systems.
This is one of the most overlooked aspects of real estate planning for people with international assets. The Turks and Caicos has specific rules about property ownership and transfer. A properly structured estate plan for someone with provincialis property would have addressed these rules directly with local TCI counsel involved in the planning. Without that planning, the property becomes subject to whatever legal proceedings the local courts determine are appropriate, which may or may not be aligned with what the American probate court is doing, which may or may not align with what the deceased person actually wanted. Different laws, different countries.
The specific documents that would have changed Prince's story completely, and that every person with a complex estate needs to have in place. A revocable living trust, naming specific trustees who understood his vision for Paisley Park, his catalog, and his creative legacy. People who knew what the vault meant. People who understood why the Providenciales property existed. Not generic heirs selected by a statute. A pour-over will, directing any assets not in the trust to transfer there at death, ensuring that everything he owned ended up administered according to his wishes rather than Minnesota intestacy law. An intellectual property management plan, designating who could authorize releases from the vault, who could approve licensing deals, who could control the use of his name and image, and what his specific wishes were for unreleased recordings. A Paisley Park management plan, a specific instructions for whether Paisley Park should be maintained as a private facility, converted to a museum, preserved as a creative space available to other artists, or handled in some other way that honored what it had meant to Prince. A multi-jurisdictional real estate plan, coordinated with local council in the Turks and Caicos to address the Providenciales property. Specifically, ensuring that the transfer of that property was governed by his wishes rather than by whatever the local probate court determined was appropriate.
None of these documents are exotic or unusual. They are standard components of a well-structured estate plan for a person of Prince's wealth and complexity. And competent estate...
Any competent.
Thank you. A planning attorney giving a full picture of Prince's assets and wishes could have prepared all 5 of these documents in a matter of weeks. The cost would have been a fraction of what the 6-year probate proceeding consumed.
The war. Prince understood intellectual property better
than almost any artist alive.
He understood what ownership meant. He understood the difference between generating wealth and protecting it. He spent his career demonstrating that understanding in the most public and dramatic ways possible. And he never applied that to understanding the one document that would have protected everything after he was gone. The will is not a complicated document. It is a statement of intent. Prince had the most clearly defined intentions of any artist of his generation. He just never wrote them down in the one place where they would have been legally binding. I was in that room at the American Music Awards in 2016 when they honored Prince. And what I felt beyond the music, beyond the beauty of the tribute, was the weight of what was already happening. By the time that tribute was performed, the estate battle had already begun.
Yeah.
The heirs were already in probate court. The IRS had already filed its claim. The Paisley Park Museum was already being planned by people operating without instructions. The vault was already sealed pending legal proceedings. The kingdom Prince had spent his entire life building, the recording compound, the catalog, the British West Indies property, all of it was already being administered by the Minnesota probate court. The music was extraordinary, the tribute was real, and simultaneously, everything he had built was being sorted by a legal process that did not know him and had not been invited into his life. The people who chose those islands, Providenciales, Parrot Cay, North Caicos, Middle Caicos, chose them because they understood that what you build in private is often your most significant legacy.
Yeah.
Prince understood that. He chose those waters deliberately. He built something there that was entirely his, and then he died without a will. And everything he chose, deliberately, specifically, with the full force of his extraordinary intelligence, was handed to a process that knew nothing about the choosing.
The 20-year question for this week. If you died tonight, every asset you own, every property you have chosen, every creative work you have built, would it go to the people you would have chosen under the conditions you would choose, with the instructions you would give, or would it go to whoever your state's intestate law selects, administered by a court that does not know you and does not care about the difference between a piece of property and a deliberate choice about how to live? Very important to do that.
I am Natalie Francine. This is Celebrity Estate Interrupted.
And I'm Alexis Nassif. This is Wealth, War, and Real Estate.
For women, by women. See you next time.
Bye-bye.